Welcome back to the Pathfinders podcast. I'm your host, Pete Schramm, founder and CEO of Latitude. And today we're going to talk about two main things: the career map of our guest and their personal board of advisors. Reminder that the career map goes into 5 different dimensions of the past, present, future: the positions you held, the skills, education, certification, the achievements and accomplishments. And then number 5 is on the fun stuff and the personal side of things. And then once you have a little bit of a plan, wouldn't it be nice to bounce those ideas off of some other people, some guides, your personal board of advisors, those multiple mentors that are helping fuel your journey along the way, each of the steps? And it might change over time. We've heard that plenty of times throughout the different episodes on the Pathfinders podcast. This is going to be posted to the different podcast platforms on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and on LinkedIn. So please comment along the way. Without further ado, the quote from our guest today comes actually from Isaiah chapter 6, verse 8. Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send? Who will go for us?" And I said, "Here I am. Here am I. Send me." George Sample, our guest for today, principal consultant at Blue Streak Consultants. He was previously a vice president at the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland and Director of Human Resources for the Cuyahoga County Public Library, and HR Manager at Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District, and the Lubrizol Corporation. He's on the board of directors for John Carroll University, United Way of Greater Cleveland, Red Cross Northern Ohio Branch, Cuyahoga County Public Library Foundation, Random Acts of Kindness Everywhere, past president of the Cleveland SHRM Group. He's also Cleveland Crane's Excellent in HR Award 2021 winner. Overall excellence. I don't know when George sleeps, plain and simple. There's a lot of stuff that he has done, and he's probably going to talk about some of the things that he hasn't yet done, but is going to do pretty soon. A fun fact is that he has played in paintball tournaments in 6 different states. From paintball to people. George, what's up?
Man, it's running around. I used to say to folks, like, hey, I like running around shooting my friends. I had to clean that up because it didn't come off sounding right for folks when I was talking about paintball.
Yeah.
It's my pleasure to be here. Paintball? Such a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Where does affinity for paintball start?
You know, it's one of those things. From my college senior trip, we went down to Daytona Beach, and we were doing a few different things. And it was like, somebody's like, hey, let's go play paintball. And I had never played paintball before. So we go out there and we play paintball, and it is an absolute blast. So I got back from my college trip, and after I got done with college, started playing paintball on and off. So I've been playing since, and most people start playing when they're like kids.
Yeah.
First time I touched a paintball marker, I was 21, 22.
Wow.
So just enjoyed it and just had a blast playing it over the years.
So there was a period of time when I thought I might get into paintballing, right? Growing up on a farm, you got plenty of space. People would sneak on the property and play. Are we talking like a Tippmann 98 Custom? I think there was a Tippmann A5 was another option out there. Do we have the longer barrel? What kind of tools are we working with here? What's the weapon of choice?
Yeah, so when I first got into it, I had a Tippmann A5.
There we go. Okay.
The first time I went to so I was playing in the woods at first, and then went to speedball. So speedball, they don't play with Tippmanns. They play with these things. You're tossing 15, 20 balls a second. So my marker of choice now is the Planet Eclipse LV 1.2. They have the LV2 out, but I just love my LV 1.2. So that's what I play with these days. Planet Eclipse LV. So I'm 15 balls a second. Actually, tournament is 10 balls a second. But if you can uncap it, those markers will go up to like 15 balls a second, letting it roll. So it's a good time for sure.
Oh my goodness. All right. We'll have to talk to John and some of the folks in the Cleveland area and see if we can make our way out there for an educational how to paintball, right? People might not like the idea of getting hit, but I think that can feed, we'll get into the flow of show and the whole questions that I have planned.
Great
exactly.
Team building event.
So what are your thoughts on that? Of this actually as a team building event, right? You've done lots of stuff with people in HR, and so you know, hey, what gets people in trouble, very much so. But we like to talk about the side of HR where HR is the good guy. And I love Blue Streak Consultants to have a positive impact on as many careers as possible. So where's this idea of paintballing as a team building thing come into play?
No, it's funny because once a year I used to get together with my civilian friends
Yeah.
to play paintball.
The muggles.
But it's a good time. It's a good bonding thing because you have to communicate. You have to work together as a team. So it makes you in real time, because there's some stress, some pressure there,
Oh yeah.
communicate and come together as a team. So personally, me being an advocate of the game of paintball, I always recommend it as something to bring groups together and have a good time.
All right, maybe we'll do a little Cleveland versus Pittsburgh action at some point here. All right, moving beyond paintball for now. Maybe we'll come back to it. George, growing up, what'd you want to be?
I want to be a fireman.
Fireman. Okay.
Well, for me, like I'm from Cleveland. I'm from inner city Cleveland. And it was interesting because one of the things I talk about now is so important for kids to have exposure to what jobs are even out there. Because when I was a kid, I had no idea what a human resource professional was. There's so many things that I do now that I just had no visibility into it. So there was a limited set of things that were even possible. So you saw the fire trucks, like that looks cool. So growing up, wanted to be on the fire truck, running up buildings, big old fire hose.
Whoa. Okay. Did you ever get involved? I went through all the background and everything, did a little bit of digging. Was there ever any volunteer fire department work on your journey?
Not for me. I do a whole bunch of volunteer stuff, and I realized that when you read my bio, I was like, I need some of these boards. But I've never delved into volunteer firefighting though.
Okay. Okay. You're still supporting the community in a myriad of other capacities. All right. So you didn't study firefighting in college. Talk to us a little bit about what went into your selection process for where you wanted to take your career.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I was fortunate to be in a pretty cool program during high school where we went over during our senior year to the Cleveland Clinic 3 times a week in a department.
Whoa.
They had an opening in the computer department. I didn't know anything about computers at all, but I was like, hey, I'll try this out. And that's what launched me going to John Carroll University to get my undergrad in computer science. So that was the launch of my career. When I went to Lubrizol, first 7 years as a programmer, a lot of that work, HRIS, and that HRS work was what got me acclimated with the folks in HR, their practices and policies, and then kind of launched me into a proper HR manager role to start off with my career.
I saw that what applications engineer was one of the first roles, right?
That was the role. It was zeros and ones. So it was funny because I would do my core work for 40, 45 hours, but then I was very involved in our employee resource groups. I was involved in all the different United Way committees. I would go to the luncheons, the parties. I would do all this stuff because this was, post college. Lubrizol was my first organization post college, so I was just like, well, I'm kind of still kicking it college style, honestly. So I was there a bunch, and made a lot of really, really good connections. And that was so key for me early in my career. Is I was just curious to learn about other folks. I spent a significant amount of time in departments outside of IS, just connecting with our other departments, learning what they do, having a better understanding of how that work came together and connected together to make sure organization ran as smoothly as the organization did.
George, I think some of the best, maybe most influential and impactful HR leaders come from not HR, right? So you were zeros and ones, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully you're now and have been, giving more than zeros and ones on performance reviews and such. But talk a little bit about like that was me, right? Growing up professionally, it was HR is the bad guy, right? You don't want to be any part of that. And my buddies will still give me a hard time being like, Pete, what are you doing in this space? I'm like, there's so much opportunity. So where along your journey, George, did that switch kind of flip for you to be like, they're not the bad guy. There's goodness in here.
It was so like I mentioned, I did work with HRIS, so I was working really closely with our HR folks.
Yeah.
Then with my work with our employee resource groups, they asked me, hey, we think you'd be a good fit to be our manager of diversity, equity, inclusion, because I had so many relationships across the organization at different levels of the organization. I didn't know you weren't supposed to talk to the senior executives at a Fortune 500 company. So I would just talk with them. So I had relationships with folks at every level of the organization, just because like nobody told me that I should be nervous to do that. So when they asked me that, I was like, sure, I'll try that. So I found myself as the manager of diversity, equity, inclusion for a Fortune 500 company. I remember that it was like literally my first month being in the role. So it's like, hey, you're going to learn the subject matter expertise from the ground up, but you have the relationships, and relationships is the important part for being influential in this work. That first month, We were in a succession planning meeting. So part of my work was to ensure that we were doing everything we can to ensure the entire workforce had access to opportunities. And I saw how HR professionals, by knowing the talent in their organizations, were crafting the future of the organization, talking about which employees we're going to put into high potential programs, which employees were positioned for promotions, which employees had the appropriate skills to be managers within the organization. And that was in the first month. And that turned the light bulb on. Because at first I was like, I'll do this HR role for a couple of years. Then I'm going to go back to my zeros and ones. Then I was like, oh, this is the place to be.
Yeah. You can
that was the
positively
moment.
influence. Yeah. So many different avenues you can go in, aligning people's strengths and interests to the needs of the organization. That's Absolutely. I think it was right before COVID, whenever it finally all came together for me. Let's go back to that ERGs bit for a second. That was, 2009, 2010, before, I want to say before DEIB was popular, right? So what drew you to that piece? I don't know. Did you seek it out? Did they say, hey, you ought to do this? But it was important then, still important now, whether people say, hey, we keep the letters, we don't keep the letters. Just talk about what drew you to it. And let's also give a plug for some of the work that you've done over the years, why it's still important to keep it in our organizations today.
Yeah. Well, back in my day, it was just D&I. Literally, it was D&I. So it was going back to that before I stepped into that managed diversity and inclusion role. I was so involved in employee resource groups because they're great ways to connect your employees within the organization. So I was one of the founders of our young professional resource group at Lubrizol, which is now a global entity. They have chapters of it all across the globe. It came across because we didn't do a great job of making sure early career professionals within the organization even knew each other. So I knew a lot of them because I spent so much time, at the organization, going to different parts of the organization. But there were so many early career professionals at the company who just never got outside their silo or their department, and they didn't have connections with each other. What we found when we created the Young Professional Resource Group at Lubrizol, we were able to up retention. We were able to up engagement in regards to early career professionals. There's like, hey, look at this vibrant community. Look at me able to make all these relationships that are really, really key. So that was so important in regards to engagement, in regards to belonging, in regards to, is this a place where I want to spend my time? Is this a place where I have people around who are in similar kind of life stage that I'm at? Because that's really, really important. We have that our entire lives growing up. You're in school, you're always around folks who are your same age, same life stage. Same thing in college. We're around folks who are same age, same life stage. Then you get into corporations, and that gets diffuse. So now you have to consciously look for it. Whereas before your entire life, you were just in that environment. And that's one of the transitions I think sometimes we miss. And that's why HR professionals are so important, to be able to cultivate environments where folks can be around people who have very similar life kind of circumstances, to be able to have those conversations and build community that way.
One of the ways to do that and take action for all of our listeners here is that idea of a career map and a personal board. So, George, I'm curious, when did you first put together an initial career map?
So for me, the career map idea didn't really happen until I started working very closely with human resources.
Yeah.
Because before that, it was just like, oh, I'm interested in computers, I'll go do that. Okay, I'm good at this, so I'll keep on doing this role. When I started having the conversations with our HR folks, understanding what they did for the organization, that was like, oh, I need to get serious about what direction my career will take.
Okay. And would you say that you had some mentors early on?
Absolutely.
Let's talk about some of the first potential board members that were there guiding you on this journey.
I would say the first one was my high school track coach.
Hey,
my high school track coach was so impactful in regards to me and my college search. And just being thoughtful about what I want to get out of college, being thoughtful about what does the experience look like for me. Do I want a big college? Do I want a small college? Do I want to play sports in college? What are my grades? What are my test scores? Where they allow me to land at? So my high school track coach was / guidance counselor / mentor.
Yep.
/ realistically the first member of my board of directors, and it still is to this day.
That's cool.
So that was my first member of my board of directors, but he was the first person who really got things going for me. And then I was fortunate when I got into college, I entered a General Electric.
Yep.
So I had a manager there. My manager, General Electric, was also a fantastic person who served as a mentor for me, helped connect me to that first opportunity at Lubrizol, and was fantastic as another person who I was able to get advice from, bounce ideas off of, and played a pivotal role in my life.
Yeah, so you mentioned sometimes these guides are inside our organization, sometimes they're outside our organization, and sometimes they might guide us to other pastures where we flip our badge, right? We go
Yeah.
elsewhere. We can always boomerang and come back. But what's your take? Say, you're back working at the bank and you have some different mentoring initiatives going on internally. What if somebody mentors somebody out of the organization? Are you going to be pretty frustrated and angered by that? Or what's your take going to be as a leader? There's good and bad, right? But how would you go through that piece?
Yeah. So I always tell
Note,
folks,
note that we're not trying to poach talent. We're not trying to tell everybody to leave your current employer. Newsflash, disclaimer,
legal
CYA,
disclaimer,
all those pieces. Yep.
legal disclaimer at like the bottom of the screen. One of the things I wrote a blog post about this a very long time ago, talking about I'm in Northeast Ohio. So Northeast Ohio what's the Northeast Ohio succession plan? Because folks at any point, any time, they may leave, and not because they're unhappy with your organization. Maybe they have a spouse that's gone somewhere else. Maybe there are family commitments that takes them somewhere else. Maybe there's a fantastic opportunity that opens up for them that just the timing wasn't right at your organization.
Mm-hmm.
However, when we hire from outside our organization, they're not coming from Mars. Whenever we hire into our organization, they're coming from somewhere else. Sometimes they're coming from college, but oftentimes they're coming from other organizations that have poured their resources into those folks.
Yeah.
So, there's a give and take in regards to us making sure people have the tools to go up organizations. Because, hey, it's a better situation to be in that you've prepared more people for those next levels than underprepared them and then have to be like, well, we have to go outside. As you're doing, matter of fact, the organizations do a better job in regards to learning and development, mentoring, coaching, they'll lose more folks, but those folks are going to be such advocates and such promoters of the organization and what you did for them career-wise. I spent 11 years at Lubrizol. I'm exceptionally grateful for the growth that I was able to have there. And I'm always like an advocate for folks looking to that as a fantastic organization. I've been fortunate career-wise to be in some really good places. And that is because they focused on development. They were able to give me things to help me build my skill sets, allowed me to stretch the boundaries of my skill set and get to those edges for sure.
100%. And I think not all organizations are created equal, just like your track coach was helping you decide on that college selection process. Very similar with the organization and job selection process, right?
Yeah.
Definitely not all created equal. I still think back to my time at Lockheed Martin and how much I enjoyed it. And yeah, am I employed there anymore? No. But would I go back? Do I speak highly of it? Have I helped people get into the organization? Yeah. Have I helped people transition out of the organization? Also, yeah. But I think it's that piece is, you know what's there and you can't always go back to it. So yeah, definitely. Shout out to Lubrizol. Shout out to Lockheed Martin. Now, George, another question we like to talk about on here is you're not at Lubrizol anymore. You mentioned, over a decade of experience there, remarkable, really, really amazing experiences. What fed into the decision to leave, right? We talk about the first job, we talk about some of those first mentors, but the first jump is also a big one to talk through.
That is a big one because, like I tell folks all the time, like I professionally grew up at Lubrizol. It was college, Lubrizol, like that was it. And so when I was recruited, so for me at Lubrizol, the next opportunity was going to be, serving at a plant. So in an HR function at one of our plants here in Northeast Ohio. But then I was recruited by the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District. It was like, hey, we're going to give you a team. So now the decision in front of me is, do I stay here where I'm comfortable at, going into a role that's going to be individual contributor position still, or do I go and lead this team, which is going to accelerate my career, going into a whole new environment where I don't know those folks, they don't know me. I don't have 11 years of equity from a relationship and company knowledge standpoint. It'll be starting over, but the opportunity to lead a team is something I haven't had before. It was like, let me now get out my comfort zone. Let me go stretch and see if I can push forward career wise. Because at Lubrizol, you had a bunch of really, really good HR folks. And I tell folks all the time, like, if you want to excel career wise, you got to find your way how to navigate around some folks, get past some folks. And sometimes that means going to different organizations,
Yep.
finding opportunities at those different organizations that just weren't available at the organization you're currently at. So that was the opportunity for me at the sewer district. Turned out to be a fantastic move. It was a fantastic organization where I learned a lot that helped me propel even further within my career.
I think it's one of the important reasons to have one of those career maps early on, right? Excuse me. We might not know exactly which position we're going to next, but what are those experiences that we want to add into the future columns of our career map? What are some of those achievements and accomplishments? And just like you said, hey, I might be able to lead people if I stay here, but if I go elsewhere, it might springboard me a little bit sooner, right? I can always come back. I'm not going to burn any bridges, but it's that piece of where do I want to get to? And I think it's important to share the career map with our leaders and our internal guides so that they're well aware. Because who knows, right? Maybe there was somebody in another part of the other cross of town in Cleveland, right? On another part of Northeast Ohio. And
Yeah,
they say, son of a gun, I need a George Sample on my
yeah,
team. I need that fella, right? But
yeah,
if we don't make it clear to others, not in a I need this golden, ticket handout, give me mindset, but hey, here's where I'd like to grow. And here's where I'd like, and not always is it going to be inside the organization. We can both agree on that. So you left and you've had a couple of steps since then. Who would
yeah.
you say are some of the most prominent people that have stayed on your personal board over these years, guiding you along the way, George?
Yeah, so I will name names. So the first one is Larry Miller. So
Hmm.
Larry Miller was the person who took a chance on me at Lubrizol to hire me into that first manager diversity inclusion role, knowing like, hey, you have the relationships, you don't have the DEI foundation, but you'll be able to learn that, and served as a mentor for me, a person who was able to help me grow because that first year was hard. It was a very, very different role than the role I
Hmm.
had played before because that first year was a learning year.
Yeah.
So his grace and patience and being able to spend time with me, because he's the chief human resources officer for a 7,000 employee, multi-billion-dollar Fortune 500 company. He could have found much better uses of his time than hanging out with this guy, but he did. He invested that time within me. And then when I went to the regional sewer district, so two folks I mentioned there. So Constance Hawk was the person who hired me into that role there, and then Douglas Dykes. Both of them were exceptional leaders within the regional sewer district who are fantastic people. And all three of those folks are folks I still call friends to this day, who I interact with on a regular basis. Whenever I made career moves, like when I made the move to go from the sewer district to be HR director for the library, and also when I went to the library to the Fed, like I called up Larry, I called up Douglas just to get their input and take on that, because there's the folks who both helped me career wise, and I was able to know, trusted, and had my best interests at heart,
Yep.
and were able to help me walk through and think about those opportunities and situations.
100%. A big piece that comes up, well, I guess two main pieces, right? Where do I find these potential mentors? You talked to us that, they were kind of sort of your leaders, your guides, people that
Yeah,
you were reporting to, interacting with consistently. The next piece is, what do I talk about with these folks? So some of the first things are, share your background, share your interests, share some of the career map drafts. I look at yours, you look at mine, but
yeah.
then talk to us a little bit more about what'd you talk about in each of these conversations? Maybe it was structured, maybe it was not as structured, but what were some of those items that came up in conversations?
It's so helpful to have people who have been down the path
Hmm.
help you to dispel some of like different misperceptions or just boogeymen you have in regards to what happens going down. For instance, talking to Larry. Larry was chief human resources manager officer for a Fortune 500 company. I'm like, Larry, do I have to work 20 hours a day, 7 days a week in order to do that kind of a role? So people, like, number one, dispelling some of the myths or the
Hmm.
mental roadblocks we put in place for ourselves, they help you to get those roadblocks out the way. And then also being able to serve as a mirror to you, to say, here are the skills that you have that are really strong. Here are some things that you need to work on to make sure that you are well positioned to continue to advance career wise. So, just them, number one, helping me understand what does reality look like from a person who has already ascended to a level that I aspire to go to.
Mm-hmm.
And then number two, making it tangible in regards to the map from where my skills and experiences are now to where they need to be for me to achieve these things that I am desiring to achieve.
Maps and gaps we like to talk about in those terms.
Yeah.
Okay. And then at some point you said, I'm going to go do my own thing.
Yeah. So
Why
for
why
me,
in the world would you do that? You said, I can play more paintball, or what is it?
yeah. So for me, I had been actually consulting on the side for like about a decade.
Mm-hmm.
As we mentioned, like I was past president of Cleveland site of Human Resource Management. So I'd often be at events because earlier in my tenure with there, I was in charge of our programs committee. So I'd often be opening events or closing events. And then people would come up to me after those events, usually folks from smaller organizations, like an HR department of one or some admin pretended to be HR person. Be like, hey, we're struggling. We need help hiring this kind of person, or we need help with diversity, equity, inclusion, or we need help with training, or we need a speaker for this event we're having. So I was doing that kind of stuff for the past 10 years. And then also, as you open with my bio, that long list of boards I'm on, I've always been really civically involved, really community involved. So I've had a lot of connections across Northeast Ohio for a very long time. So the combination of having all of those connections, having done that consulting work in the past, it was at the point where there was enough projects coming, people asking me to do work. I was like, hey, let me try this. And if I suck at this, I'll go back and get a job. If I
Yeah.
go down the flames, I'll go back and get a job. But let me try this and see if this can work. And it's been a year and a half where I've been doing this work now, and it has been exceptional for me to be able to have a positive impact on a lot of careers.
Now talk a little bit about what you do, right? Hey, George, when am I going to call up Blue Streak? I saw your video on your website. If you're listening, please go check out the website, watch the video. But why am I going to call you up, right? I'm what size organization? Am I in HR? Am I not in HR? Are you going to do consulting for me? You going to do a project? You do tech tool implementations? You going to be a speaker? What do you do for me, man?
Yeah. So my key thing is to have a positive impact on many careers as possible. I do that by impacting folks' talents. So a number of folks I do coaching for who are managers, also individual contributors. I do a number of different workshops on influence, negotiation. How do you communicate when there's conflict? I also do presentations, and then sometimes some fractional HR. The fractional HR, that's for smaller organizations, but those other services in regards to coaching, workshops, and presentations, those are for services I do right now for organizations of all sizes and all across the country.
And didn't you do a HR talk recently? It was supposed to be like 16 or 20 hours long, but somehow you boiled everything HR into like an hour or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah. So what I did was the state of human resources. So what I did, if any of those who remember, who are my age, remember the Choose Your Own Adventure books, it was a Choose Your Own Adventure presentation. So I had definitely the type of titles of 10 different blog posts I've done recently. So if you go on the website, you'll see the blog that I have there. It hits on different areas in regards to human resources. So I allowed the cloud, I'm like, okay, which topic are we getting into? And over the course of that hour, we got through 8 of the 10 topics we have listed, but we went in the order that the folks wanted to go through. It was such a blast to have an engaging conversation, an interactive conversation, sharing different best practices that people have from their organizations as well, to be able to talk about how do we, number one, build community as HR practitioners, and then number two, talk about best practices that are going to be helpful to both us and the folks who are around us. So a fantastic opportunity to be able to share some knowledge and build community.
And they better give you a call to walk through numbers 9 and 10, or else they're missing out on getting their money's worth over there.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty remarkable, George. Let's go back to the piece of the DEI, right?
Yeah.
So let's fast forward 2, 3, 5 years from now. What do you think we can be doing inside organizations to add the most value? Whether we're in a, chief diversity officer role or we're part of an employee resource group, what are some of the key things that our organization must be doing? And what are some of those kind of stretch sort of things? And I don't want you to give out what is the saying, baby with the bathwater, right? You don't have to give away all the secrets, but if any of these things do resonate with what George is about to say here, give him a call and follow up on these. But what's the future look like? What do you think good is?
Yeah, the key thing is understanding this diversity, equity, inclusion work is work that is helpful and impactful for everyone within organizations. So I like to talk about inclusion. Have you ever been in a room where somebody says something, then there's no response to it, and then 15 minutes later, someone who has more influence or a higher title within the organization says the exact same words, and all of a sudden, it's the best idea everyone has ever heard?
Yep.
Well, that's an inclusion issue. It doesn't matter who's in the room. Do we make sure that everyone who's in the room has the opportunity to bring all of their content to be able to contribute to our conversations and respect that people have to add to these conversations? It makes our organizations better. One of the things Jack Welch said in one of his books, they were doing a training in Crotonville, and they had, for the first time, opened it up to basically line staff and the person who had been at the organization for 25 years. And he said, for 25 years, you've had my hands. And when you could have had my mind as well for that 25 years, in addition, for free. So when you talk about this diversity, equity, inclusion work, it is how do we make sure we're creating environments where everyone feels like they're a part of helping our organizations move forward. People feel like they can bring ideas that are different, where we can have respectful conversations and disagree, but make sure we're fostering those conversations and move things forward, where we don't shun people out for just thinking differently in a way that might help us advance our organizations. And also, can I be somewhere where people care about my own well-being? We're dealing with humans until Skynet is activated, until AI has drones that walk around the floor of our companies. We have humans who have entire human experiences. It's so important for us with our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. It's so important for us to make sure that we are understanding that and accounting for that within the fabric of our organizations. So as you ask the question, what does this work look like 5 years from now? We're going to continue as long as we have humans working in organizations. It's so important for us to create cultures where they all feel like they are valued within those organizations.
Yep.
And they're able to bring forth their ideas, their thoughts, their contributions, and have those be respected and honored and heard in part of your overall work culture and work product.
Respected, honored, and heard. There's a book by Dr. Victoria Mattingly out of the Pittsburgh area, Inclusiolytics, that we talk about often on here. Dr. V was just on a recent podcast episode, but I think it's something that everybody needs to think about. George, moving to the next one, when we talk a little bit about this idea of a career map, a little bit about this idea of a personal board of advisors. Where do you see the value to the organization, right? The overall company at a high level, when each one of our employees has a career map, this little bit of a vision, right? Not just in their head, but on paper or, on a software, and then a couple of guides around them. How's that help an organization?
I cannot overstate how helpful it is when everyone's on a page where they understand what their career map is and how it ties into the overall career map of the organization. Like you cannot overstate the importance of that. I've been in multiple rooms because every organization I've been in, I've been part of the succession planning, workforce planning processes. And so often we're having these conversations as leadership, and then we're like, hey, such and such would be great in this position. Do we know what such and such wants out their career? No. Oh, well, let's see if we can figure that out. How powerful is it if, as much as robust as we are with our succession planning processes, if each person in our organization truly understands what they're going to get out their career? And there are so many people in your organizations that come to work every day. They got to pay the bills, so they're going to show up and do it, but they just have no thought in regards to what their path is going to be career-wise. Now, the energy you see from folks who understand what they contribute and also what they're going to get out of this organizational experience, it magnifies the impact they have in the organizations. Just imagine if everyone comes to your organization supercharged in that way, charging towards their career goals, which also lifts your organization. If everyone in your organization comes in that way, imagine the effectiveness, the efficiency, the productivity, the profit within your organization. I cannot overstate how important it is to make sure that every employee in your organization understands their career path, whether it be going up the career ladder or being much more of a technical expert. Everyone's a little bit different in what they want, but help them understand what they want, because the more you do, the more it will supercharge your organization.
100%. And then once we have that plan, where's the help on that mentorship side? Getting some of those guides along the way as well. How do you see that piece helping?
It's so important to have mentors, people who have been there, done that, so you can just bounce ideas off them. And there's a difference between like mentorship and coaching. Like mentor is a person who is like, hey, I think I want to be this thing. Who has been on that path already? Be like, hey, here are things. There's a different way to think about how you're handling that thing. And so, no, their experience is not going to be the exact same, but that's good to have someone who has gone that path, knowing your path up might be a little bit different from them, but just to have someone who has gone a similar kind of path to be able to bounce ideas off of, to be able to talk to when you're plateauing, be like, hey, stay the course, to help you build your resilience in regards to career, because careers are tough, especially if you go up these organizational pyramids. The altitude gets the air gets thin as you go up in the altitude. It gets harder and harder and harder. So to be able to talk to the folks who have been able to climb up within organizations, or for folks who want to get just more breadth in regards to their technical skill set, to be able to talk to other folks who are technical fellows, who are experts, who are subject matter experts, who are sought after in their field, to be able to say, hey, what's the work look like for me to aspire to the level that you've gotten to? That is of crucial importance for anyone who wants to move their career forward.
I love it. George, I'm getting ready to do a little bit of a recap over here. Any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners today?
Sometimes we think that once we get done with college, like we're done learning. That is the opposite. It is so important for us to be able to learn every single day. Just like spend some time. Like these days, I carve out like an hour. I make sure to do at least an hour each day of reading and writing. For you, it might be just like 5, 15, 20 minutes. A big practice I had for myself was being able to listen to audiobooks. When I'm in the car, I'm listening to audiobooks to help me keep on upskilling. So the key thing for us career-wise is to always be learning, always be intentional about what information we're taking in, so we can be enhancing those skill sets for us for the long term.
1 or 2 books that you want to give a shout out to that are good reads?
Yeah. So for earlier career folks, I like suggesting The Algebra of Happiness by Scott Galloway. It really helps you to be thoughtful about what do you want to get out your career. I mean, because hey, maybe you want to work 40 hours and that's cool. But if you want to expend the rocket fuel necessary to get to the stratosphere where you get your own private jet and personal island, that's a different thing. Either way is okay. It doesn't matter which way you go, but be intentional about which one you're going to choose for yourself. So The Algebra of Happiness by Scott Galloway is a great book. Other one that I would recommend, I have a bunch of books. Lord, I would say probably Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. Communication, and there's a bunch of different communication books that I throw out there. You being able to communicate and to be able to make human connections is so important to your success in life. So Persuasion, and I know Pete said too, I'm gonna slip a third one in there. Getting More is my favorite negotiation title by Stuart Diamond. For me, the framework is comprehensive enough. There's enough examples in there to help you make negotiation actionable in your everyday life. You're negotiating every single day. So for those who are better at negotiation, just imagine everything in your life which is 10% better. Everything in your life. If you have a negotiation skill set, that's a reality for you. That is in your purview to make at least everything in your life 10% better. So highly recommend Getting More by Stuart Diamond.
Well, I appreciate that. George, thank you very much for joining us today. And thanks to John Bernadovitz for bringing us together. From paintball to people, you wanted to be a fireman and You also shared that all kids need exposure to opportunities. The Cleveland Clinic exposed you to zeros and ones of healthcare. Lots of connections at your job one at Lubrizol, HRIS, and ERGs. You found that relationships at all levels are really important. D&I, big piece of those first parts, right? One of the first mentors you had was your high school track coach. 11 years later at Lubrizol, you loved your time there. Larry was a great mentor there. As you moved on, Constance and Douglas were some of the great supporters whenever you were at the regional sewer district. Mentors helped demystify and demyth what is needed for success. They removed some of those mental roadblocks along the way, and they can also be a mirror for success, strengths, as well as those areas for improvement. We talked about the maps and gaps along the way. And it was cool to hear the story of, hey, 10 years on the side, I'm helping others from afar. And that led you into your full-time, more than a year and a half now, as a full-time consultant, right? Blue Streak, helping folks out with coaching, workshops, fractional HR. I love the session you do around choose your own adventure in the state of human resources. Helpful and impactful is what this future of diversity, equity, inclusion needs. Bringing out and up and over our mind, body, and perhaps even the spirit, right? Bringing everybody together so they are respected, honored, and indeed heard. Career maps are making succession planning possible, way more powerful as well. They unlock and magnify more from within our people. That altitude sickness, putting up the air quotes, is not as bad whenever we're flying higher and climbing with those right mentors. So cheers to you, George, and thank you. Learning a little bit more every day.
Oh, been such a pleasure.